The orphan bride was not abandoned at the altar. She was handed to the one man everyone feared to touch. Emma Collins stood beneath the white arch of Silver Pine Chapel, with red wine dripping from the front of her borrowed wedding dress, each drop spreading like a stain the whole pack could see. No one moved to help her. No one offered a cloth. The chapel was full of polished boots, silk gowns, gold pins, and smiling mouths that had never learned mercy. She held her small bouquet of winter daisies with both hands, because if she let go, they would see her fingers shaking. 23 years old, no parents, no dowry, no powerful bloodline, no wolf strong enough to make the room lower its voice. To the Reed family, she had always been the girl left on their porch during a snowstorm. Useful enough to scrub floors, quiet enough to blame, and forgettable enough to trade away when debts came due. At the altar, Derek Holloway adjusted the silver cuff on his sleeve and looked at her as if she were a mistake someone had dragged into the light. He was handsome, in the way sharp things could be handsome, all smooth confidence and empty warmth. Beside the first pew, Madison Reed smiled behind her gloved hand, the empty wine glass still tilted between her fingers. "Oops," she whispered, just loud enough for everyone near the aisle to hear. Laughter moved through the chapel like cold wind. Emma lowered her eyes. The wine was sticky against her skin, but the humiliation burned worse. Elder Thomas cleared his throat, trying to save the ceremony. But Derek stepped back before the binding ribbon could touch his wrist. The entire chapel went still. "I would not bind myself to an orphan with servant blood," he said, his voice calm, polished, final. Emma felt the words land one by one. Orphan. Servant. Blood. Behind her, someone snickered. Another voice murmured that the moon goddess must have a cruel sense of humor. Madison leaned close to her mother and said, "At least the dress was already ruined." Emma wanted to disappear into the floorboards. Instead, she lifted her chin because pride was the last thing they had not taken from her. Elder Thomas looked uncomfortable. "Then the bride is unclaimed," he announced softly. "By pack law, the debt remains with the Reed household, unless another accepts the bond." That was when the chapel doors opened, not loudly, not dramatically, just a slow creak of old wood and winter air. Every head turned. A man stood in the doorway, tall, beneath a dark, weathered coat, one wrist circled by an old iron shackle that caught the candlelight. A scar traced the side of his jaw. His dark hair fell near his collar. He carried no family crest, no escort, no flowers, only silence. Someone near the back whispered his name like a warning. Noah Blackwood, the silent outcast. The cursed man from the edge of the northern woods. Emma had heard the rumors. He had no voice, no pack, no place at any table. Children were told not to wander near his cabin after sunset. Derek laughed first, then others followed, relieved to have a new target. Noah did not look at them. His gray eyes found Emma through the aisle, steady and unreadable. Then he raised a small wooden board in one gloved hand. Written across it in dark ink were 7 words. "I will take the bride no one wants." The laughter exploded around him, but Emma stopped breathing. Because for the first time that day, someone had looked at her without shame. The words on the wooden board seemed to hang in the candlelit air long after Noah lowered his hand. "I will take the bride no one wants." For one impossible heartbeat, Emma heard nothing. Not the whispers, not the laughter, not the scrape of Derek Holloway stepping aside as if the entire ceremony had become a joke written for his entertainment. She only heard her own breathing, thin and careful, and the slow drip of wine from her ruined dress onto the chapel floor. Elder Thomas stared at Noah as though the man had offered to walk into a storm and call it shelter. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, voice strained. "This is a binding rite, not an act of pity." Noah did not answer. Of course he did not. He only moved down the aisle with measured steps, the old shackle at his wrist making a faint sound beneath the murmuring crowd. Emma noticed the way people leaned away from him as he passed. Alphas who had laughed at her only moments before suddenly found reasons to lower their eyes. Betas shifted back into the pews. Even Madison's smile faltered, though she quickly forced it back into place. Derek folded his arms and scoffed. "Perfect," he said loudly. "A voiceless man for a worthless bride. The moon goddess is feeling poetic today." Laughter rose again, sharper this time, eager to wound them both. Emma felt heat crawl up her neck, but Noah did not look embarrassed. He stopped several feet from her, close enough for her to see the pale scar along his jaw and the strange calm in his gray eyes. There was no pleading there, no hunger, no ownership, only a quiet question. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper, then handed it to her with careful fingers. Emma hesitated before taking it. The chapel watched, hungry for more humiliation. The paper was worn soft from being folded and unfolded many times. His handwriting was dark, steady, almost formal.
"You may walk away. No debt, no shame. I will leave if you ask me to."
Emma read the words once, then again, because she did not trust them at first. All her life, choices had been handed to others. Where she slept, what she wore, how much food was left after everyone else ate, whether she was useful enough to keep. And now this man, this feared stranger with a broken voice and an iron shackle on his wrist, was giving her the one thing no one in that chapel had offered: freedom. Madison gave a delicate laugh. "Do not be ridiculous, Emma. He probably wants a maid, not a wife." Derek leaned closer, his smile cruelly bright. "Take the offer. It is the best an orphan can hope for." Emma's fingers tightened around the paper. She looked at Noah. He had not moved. He was still waiting, not taking, not demanding, not rescuing her like she was helpless. Simply waiting. Something inside her, small and bruised but not dead, lifted its head. She turned to Elder Thomas. Her voice trembled, but it did not break. "Continue the rite." A hush fell. Derek's smile disappeared. Madison blinked as if Emma had spoken in another language. Elder Thomas swallowed.
"Child, are you certain?"
Emma looked once more at Noah Blackwood, at the man everyone feared and no one understood. "Yes," she said softly. "I will marry him." For the first time, Noah's expression changed, only slightly, a flicker in his eyes, bright and stunned, as if her answer had reached a place in him no voice ever could. Elder Thomas looked from Emma to Noah, then to the silent chapel, as if he hoped someone kinder than him would step forward and stop what was happening. No one did. The polished guests only watched with bright, hungry eyes, eager to see how low an orphan girl and a cursed outcast could fall together. The binding ribbon lay across the altar, white silk threaded with silver, meant to join two wrists before the moon goddess in the pack. It should have been warmed by blessing candles and covered in flowers. Instead, someone near the front tossed a pinch of black salt onto the floor at Emma's feet, an old superstition used for unlucky brides. The grains scattered across the wood like tiny dark stars. Madison gave a soft, satisfied laugh. "For protection," she said sweetly. "We would hate for her misfortune to follow the rest of us home." Emma kept her eyes forward, but shame pressed against her ribs so tightly she could barely breathe. Noah noticed. He noticed everything. Without a word, he stepped closer and placed one boot gently over the scattered salt, hiding it from the room. It was such a small gesture that no one else seemed to understand it, but Emma did. He had covered the insult before it could touch her again. Elder Thomas lifted the ribbon with stiff fingers. "Place your right hands upon the altar." Emma obeyed first. Her palm trembled against the cold stone. Noah set his hand beside hers, careful not to crowd her, careful not to claim more space than she allowed. The old iron shackle around his wrist brushed the altar with a quiet sound. Up close, Emma saw faint marks beneath the metal. Not fresh wounds, but the pale memory of something endured for too long. The elder wrapped the ribbon once around Emma's wrist, once around Noah's, then paused. By pack law, this bond is witnessed, but not celebrated, he said, his voice low with discomfort. Do you both accept the burden of this union? Derek gave another laugh from the side. Burden is the perfect word. Emma felt Noah's fingers shift beside hers, not touching, not gripping, just present, steady as a wall at her back. Elder Thomas looked to Noah first. Noah raised his free hand and gave one firm nod. Then the elder turned to Emma. The entire chapel seemed to lean toward her answer, waiting for doubt, waiting for regret. She thought of the porch where she had been found as a baby, the kitchen where she had eaten standing up because no chair had ever been saved for her. The years of being grateful for scraps of kindness that were never truly kind. Then she thought of the paper in her hand. You may walk away. No debt, no shame. Emma lifted her chin. I accept. The moment the words left her mouth, every candle on the altar flared silver. Gasps broke through the chapel. The ribbon warmed against her skin, not burning, not hurting, but glowing softly as moonlight spilled along its threads. Noah went completely still, his gray eyes widened. And for the first time, the silent outcast looked almost afraid. Not of Emma, of what had awakened between them, somewhere beyond the chapel walls. Far out in the winter woods, a wolf howled once, low and powerful, and every wolf in the room lowered their gaze without knowing why. Emma did not look back when she left Silverpine Chapel. If she had, she might have seen Madison Reed standing frozen beside the aisle, her smile gone pale. Or Derek Holloway staring at the silver candles as if they had personally insulted him. But Emma kept her eyes on the chapel doors and the white world beyond them, because one backward glance might have pulled her into the shame again, and she had already survived enough of it for one morning. Noah walked beside her without touching her, the binding ribbon now folded carefully in Elder Thomas's shaking hands as proof that the marriage had been sealed. Outside, winter air swept across the chapel steps and lifted the loose strands of Emma's hair. The borrowed dress clung damply where the wine had spilled, and cold slipped through the thin fabric almost at once. Before she could hide her shiver, Noah removed his dark coat and held it out to her. Emma hesitated. It was too large, worn at the cuffs, and warmer than anything she owned. He did not push it around her shoulders like a claim. He simply waited until she chose to take it. That small patience nearly broke her. She pulled the coat close, breathing in the scent of pine smoke, winter rain, and something wild beneath it, something she could not name. At the bottom of the steps waited an old black carriage with one gray horse and no driver. You came alone? She asked softly. Noah looked at her, then gave a single nod. Of course he had. Men like him were not escorted, they were avoided. As he helped her into the carriage, the church bell rang once behind them, not in celebration, but because Elder Thomas must have pulled the rope by mistake. The lonely sound followed them down the narrow road and into the northern woods. For the first mile, Emma sat with her hands folded in her lap, listening to the wheels crush snow and gravel beneath them. She wanted to ask a dozen questions. Where are we going? Why did you offer? What happened to your voice? Why did every candle turn silver when I accepted you? But Noah held the reins in silence, his profile calm beneath the gray afternoon light, and Emma found herself afraid to disturb the strange peace between them. After a while, he reached into his coat pocket and handed her a small notebook with a pencil tucked into the spine. On the first page, written before today, were the words, "You are safe with me." Emma stared at the sentence until it blurred. No one had ever promised her safety without asking for obedience in return. Behind them, far down the road, hooves sounded. Noah heard them before Emma did. His shoulders shifted slightly, not with fear, but attention. 3 riders appeared between the bare trees, moving fast enough to send snow flying from the road. Emma recognized Derek's men by their silver saddle pins. Her stomach tightened. They followed us, she whispered. Noah slowed the carriage and handed her the notebook. Stay inside. Then he stepped down into the snow. Emma clutched the coat around her and watched through the small window as the riders reined in several yards away. She could not hear their words, only see their laughing mouths and careless gestures. Noah stood still, one shackled wrist at his side, the other resting lightly against the horse's neck. The gray horse did not startle, the woods did. Every branch seemed to quiet, every bird stopped moving. A minute passed, then another. The riders' laughter faded. One by one, their horses backed away, ears lowered, refusing to come closer. The men pulled at the reins, confused, then frightened. At last, they turned and rode back toward Silverpine, without a single hand raised. Noah returned to the carriage as if nothing had happened. When Emma looked at him, he wrote only 2 words in the notebook. Horses disagree. Despite herself, Emma almost smiled, but as the carriage rolled deeper into the forest, she saw something through the trees. A massive white wolf standing on a ridge half a mile away, watching Noah with its head bowed low. Noah's cabin stood where the northern woods grew thick enough to swallow sound. It was smaller than Emma expected, built of dark timber and gray stone, with smoke curling from a chimney no one had been near enough to tend. Snow gathered along the roof in soft white edges, and beyond the porch, pine trees rose like silent witnesses. From the outside, it looked like the lonely home of a man the world had forgotten. Inside, it felt like a secret holding its breath. Emma stepped across the threshold with Noah's coat still around her shoulders, her ruined dress brushing the wooden floor. Warmth wrapped around her at once. A fire already burned in the hearth, low and steady. A kettle rested near the coals. 2 cups waited on the table. She looked at Noah, but he only closed the door behind them and set his small notebook beside the entryway, as if this had all been prepared without hands. "Did someone know we were coming?" she asked. Noah paused, then wrote, "Some houses remember their owners." It should have sounded impossible. Instead, standing there with candlelight trembling over shelves of old books and polished brass instruments, Emma almost believed him. The cabin was too tidy for an outcast and too careful for a poor man. There were no family portraits, no personal tokens, no clutter of ordinary life. Everything had purpose. Everything seemed placed to be found only by someone brave enough to look. Noah pointed toward a small room off the hall and handed her a folded bundle. Clean clothes. Rest. His handwriting was steady, but his eyes lingered on the wine stain at her dress, and something in his face tightened with quiet regret. Emma took the bundle. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once and turned away before gratitude could become too heavy between them. The room held a narrow bed, a wash basin, and a plain blue dress made of soft wool. Not elegant, but warm. Not new, but cared for. As Emma changed, she caught sight of herself in a small mirror. For the first time that day, she looked less like a public embarrassment and more like a woman who had survived. When she returned, Noah was placing bread, stew, and hot tea on the table. He did not sit until she did. That, too, unsettled her. The Reeds had always eaten first. Servants waited. Orphans accepted what remained. Emma wrapped both hands around the warm cup and let the steam touch her face. Then her gaze drifted past Noah to the wall behind him. Half hidden beneath a dark cloth was a map of the Northern Territories, marked with silver pins and red thread. Beside it rested a locked glass case holding a black cloak embroidered with the faint outline of a crowned wolf. Emma's pulse slowed. She had seen that symbol only once, stamped into the royal decrees that arrived at Silverpine each winter. No one noticed where she was looking. The room changed, not in light, not in sound, but in feeling. The air sharpened. He rose carefully and pulled the cloth over the map. Too late. Emma stood before she meant to. On the small writing desk nearby lay an unfinished letter, the ink dried halfway through a sentence. Your Majesty, the throne cannot remain empty much longer. Her fingers hovered above the page without touching it. Behind her, Noah did not move. Emma turned slowly. The silent man she had married stood in the firelight, one shackled wrist at his side, gray eyes darker than the winter sky. Noah, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Who are you really? Noah did not answer her question, but the silence that followed was not empty. It filled the cabin like deep water, pressing against the walls, the windows, the space between them. Emma stood beside the writing desk with the unfinished letter still open behind her, her heart beating too fast for such a quiet room. Your Majesty. The words would not leave her mind. Noah reached for the notebook, then stopped, as if even writing had become too dangerous. Firelight moved over the iron shackle at his wrist, and for the first time, Emma noticed the faint silver symbols carved along its edge. They were not decoration. They were a lock. His breathing changed, a sharp inhale, controlled too quickly. His fingers curled around the back of the chair, and the wood gave a faint groan beneath his grip. Noah. Emma took one step forward. He immediately stepped back and shook his head, not in anger, in warning. Then the shackle began to glow, not bright, not beautiful, but hot and pale, like moonlight trapped inside metal. Noah closed his eyes, jaw tightening, shoulders rigid beneath the weight of whatever pain he refused to show. Emma's fear shifted into something else, concern, instinct. The same quiet pull that had made her accept his hand at the altar now carried her across the room. He lifted the notebook with effort and wrote only 3 words: "Stay away." The pencil slipped from his hand before he could add more. Emma stared at the words, then at him. All her life, she had obeyed warnings meant to keep powerful people comfortable. Stay quiet. Stay useful. Stay small. But this was different. This was a man trying to protect her from his own suffering. No, she whispered. Noah opened his eyes. There was panic there now, carefully buried but real. He shook his head again, sharper this time. Emma ignored it. She took a clean towel from beside the wash basin, soaked it in cool water, and moved to his side. When she reached for the glowing shackle, he pulled his arm away, but not fast enough to frighten her. Never enough to frighten her. "I am not made of glass," she said softly. "And you are not the only person in this room who has learned how to endure pain quietly." Something in his face broke, not fully, just a crack, enough for her to see the lonely place behind it. He let her take his wrist. The metal was warm beneath the cloth, warmer than it should have been, but it did not harm her. Emma wrapped the towel around the shackle and held it there with steady hands. Noah watched her as if she had done something impossible. Minutes passed. The glow began to fade. The tightness in his shoulders loosened by degrees. Outside, snow whispered against the windows. Inside, the cabin breathed again. When he could move, Noah picked up the pencil with trembling fingers and wrote across a clean page. "Do not be kind to monsters." Emma read it, then looked at him for a long moment. The scar along his jaw, the iron at his wrist, the royal secrets hidden under dust and cloth. The terrible restraint of a man who could have taken anything but had asked for nothing. She folded the damp towel and set it aside. "Then stop acting like one," she said. Noah stared at her. The pencil fell from his hand. Somewhere deep inside the cabin, a sound echoed, faint as a bell beneath ice. A thin crack appeared across one silver symbol on the shackle. Emma saw it. So did Noah. And for the first time since she had met him, his lips parted as if a word had almost found its way home. By morning, the crack in Noah's shackle had faded to a thin silver line. But Emma could not stop seeing it. She moved through the cabin quietly, folding the blue wool dress Noah had given her, washing the cups from breakfast. Pretending ordinary tasks could make the night feel ordinary too. Noah stood near the window with his notebook in hand, watching the tree line as if the forest had begun speaking in a language only he understood. The silence between them had changed. It was no longer a wall. It was a door, still closed, but no longer locked from both sides. Emma wanted to ask about the letter, the royal cloak, the shackle, the almost word that had trembled on his lips before dawn. Instead, she asked the safer question. Will they come back? Noah did not turn. He wrote without looking down. They already have. Emma followed his gaze. Beyond the frosted glass, figures moved between the pines. Not 3 riders this time, more than a dozen. Silver saddle pins, Reed family colors. Holloway guards. At their center, wrapped in a white fur-lined coat that had never known hardship, Madison Reed stepped from the trees as if she owned the snow beneath her boots. Derek Holloway walked beside her, his polished confidence restored now that he had brought witnesses. Emma's stomach tightened, but she did not step back. Not this time. A hard knock struck the cabin door. Noah reached for the latch, but Emma touched his sleeve. Let me. His eyes searched hers. She nodded once, steady enough to surprise herself, then opened the door. Cold air rushed in. Madison looked past Emma first, into the cabin, searching for proof of poverty, shame, weakness, anything she could use. When she saw the clean hearth, the books, the warmth, her mouth thinned. So this is where you ran, she said. How charming, like a servant playing house. Derek's gaze landed on Noah. Blackwood, step aside. This does not concern you. Noah remained near the hearth, still as carved stone, the shackle hidden beneath his sleeve. Madison lifted a folded document. The marriage is under review. Elder Thomas had no authority to bind a Reed household ward to a man without rank, property, or verified pack standing. Emma belongs with us until the debt is settled. The word belongs moved through Emma like a door slamming shut. For years, she had heard it in softer forms. Our girl. Our responsibility. Our burden. Always dressed as care, always shaped like chains. I am not going back, Emma said. Madison smiled. You do not decide that. Derek stepped onto the porch. You embarrassed 2 families yesterday. Enough of this little performance. Emma felt Noah move behind her, but she lifted one hand, asking him to wait. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. No. Yesterday, I was embarrassed. Today, I am finished. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Madison's cheeks colored. You ungrateful little nobody. She reached for Noah's coat around Emma's shoulders. But Emma caught the fabric first and held it closed. The forest went silent. Not peaceful. Listening. Derek laughed, though it sounded thinner now. What will he do? Emma, write us an angry note. Noah stepped forward then. One step only. The porch boards did not creak. The wind did not move. Even Derek stopped smiling. Noah slowly removed his black glove. On the back of his hand, beneath the pale winter light, a mark appeared in silver and midnight blue, a crowned wolf surrounded by 7 stars. Madison went white. One guard dropped to one knee before he seemed to understand why. Emma stared at the mark, her breath caught between fear and wonder, while Noah lifted his eyes to Derek with the terrible calm of a man who had been silent by choice for far too long. The crowned wolf mark glowed across Noah's hand like a secret refusing to stay buried. For a moment, no one on the porch breathed. Snow drifted between the trees in slow white pieces, soft as ash, while Madison Reed stared at the symbol with all the color gone from her face. Derek Holloway recovered first, or tried to. Pride made foolish men brave in front of witnesses. A trick, he said, though his voice had lost its shine. Anyone can paint a royal mark. Noah did not move. He only looked at him, silent, steady, and terribly calm. The kneeling guard kept his head lowered, shoulders rigid. Another guard followed him down, then another. The sound of knees meeting snow moved through the group like a warning bell. Madison stepped back. Derek, she whispered, but Derek raised a hand as if he could stop fear by commanding it.
Stand up!
He snapped at his men. No one obeyed. Emma stood between the open door and the winter yard, Noah's coat wrapped around her shoulders, her pulse racing so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. The mark on his hand was the same crowned wolf she had seen on royal papers, the same one hidden on the black cloak inside the cabin, the same one every pack child learned before they learned to shift. But knowing and believing were not the same. Her mind reached for the answer and recoiled from its size. Noah Blackwood, the man who had offered her a choice when no one else would, was not merely hiding from the kingdom. The kingdom had been waiting for him. Derek took one step toward Emma, not close enough to touch her, but close enough to make Noah's eyes sharpen. "Move aside," Derek said. "Whatever he is pretending to be, you are still the dead bride of Silverpine." The word struck the air, and something inside Noah changed. The iron shackle at his wrist flashed white. Emma heard the same faint bell from the night before, but louder now, ringing beneath the snow, beneath the trees, beneath her own heartbeat. Noah's jaw tightened. A thin crack split across the metal. Then another. Madison covered her mouth. Derek froze. Emma turned just as the shackle broke open and fell into the snow with a soft, final sound. The forest exhaled. For the first time since she had met him, Noah drew in a full breath that did not seem borrowed from pain. He looked at Emma, and in his eyes she saw apology, gratitude, and something deeper than either. Then he turned to the yard. When he spoke, his voice was low, rough from years of silence, and powerful enough to make every candle inside the cabin flicker. "Kneel." One word, that was all. Derek dropped to his knees as if the earth itself had answered. Madison followed, trembling, her white coat sinking into the snow. Every guard bowed, even the horses lowered their heads. Emma could not move. Noah stepped beside her, not in front of her this time, but beside her, as if the world had to see they stood together. "No debt binds my wife," he said. Each word measured and clear. No house owns her. No pack may shame her. By royal law and by mate bond, Emma Collins is under the protection of the crown. Derek lifted his head just enough to whisper, "Your Majesty." The title passed through the yard like lightning without thunder. Emma stared at Noah, at the silent outcast who had never been powerless, only patient. And when his hand reached for hers, he waited, still giving her the choice. This time, Emma took it. The ride back to Silverpine Chapel felt nothing like the road that had carried Emma away. Yesterday, the forest had seemed endless and cold, a place where unwanted women and silent men disappeared from the world. Now, the same road opened before them as if winter itself had stepped aside. Noah rode beside her in the old black carriage, no longer hunched beneath secrecy, no longer hiding the mark on his hand. His voice was still rough when he spoke, used sparingly, as if every word had weight. "You do not have to face them," he said. Emma looked down at the coat around her shoulders, the same worn coat he had offered when she had nothing but a stained dress and a room full of laughter. "Yes," she answered softly, "I do." When they reached the chapel, the entire pack had already gathered. News traveled faster than horses when shame was chasing it. Madison stood near the front steps, pale and silent. Derek kept his eyes lowered. Elder Thomas trembled so hard he nearly dropped the silver binding ribbon when Noah stepped from the carriage. But Noah did not ask for bows. He did not raise his voice. He simply offered Emma his hand and waited. That small choice, again and again, was what nearly brought tears to her eyes. She took his hand and stepped onto the same chapel stones where black salt had been thrown at her feet. This time, no one laughed. Noah led her inside, past the pew where Madison had spilled the wine, past the altar where Derek had called her servant blood, past every face that had watched her humiliation and mistaken silence for weakness. Then he removed the black royal cloak from his shoulders, the one embroidered with the crowned wolf and 7 stars, and placed it gently over Emma. The fabric settled around her like midnight warmed by moonlight. "They called you unwanted," Noah said, his voice carrying through the chapel without effort, "but she was the only one who chose me without a crown, without a voice, and without a promise of power." Emma felt the room blur, not because she was afraid, but because something inside her had finally stopped bracing for cruelty. Noah turned to the pack. "From this day forward, Emma Collins is my wife, my Luna, and the queen your pride failed to recognize." No cheers came at first, only silence. Then Elder Thomas lowered himself to one knee. One by one, the others followed until the chapel that had mocked her became the chapel that bowed. Madison whispered her apology, but Emma did not need it to stand taller. Derek could not meet her eyes, but Emma no longer needed him to regret what he had done. Justice, she realized, was not always watching cruel people suffer. Sometimes it was simply becoming so whole that their cruelty no longer owned any room inside you. And as Noah's hand closed gently around hers, Emma understood the truth destiny had been whispering all along. True strength does not always roar. Sometimes it waits in silence, offers a choice, covers the salt at your feet, and sees your worth before the world is forced to admit it. This story reminds us that the people society overlooks are often carrying the deepest courage. Kindness is not weakness, gentleness is not surrender, and love, when it is real, does not ask who applauds before it protects, honors, and stays. I believe Emma's victory was not becoming queen. It was refusing to let humiliation decide her value. What do you think was the most powerful moment in her journey? Was it when she said yes to Noah? When he finally spoke? Or when she walked back into that chapel with her head held high? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if stories about courage, destiny, and quiet strength speak to your heart, subscribe and stay with us for the next tale.